Thank you so much all for joining us tonight. My name is Steve Bromage. I'm the Executive Director of Maine Historical Society. On behalf of all of us at MHS, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 2025 Maine History Maker Award celebration. We are thrilled to have this opportunity to honor and say thank you to the Nelson family. The Maine History Maker Award recognizes contemporary Mainers who contribute to the long-term vitality and identity of Maine. It recognizes the profound ways which history shapes Maine today and the role that each of us plays as stewards of this very, very special place. Now we have several former Maine History Maker recipients here that I'd like to recognize. You might not be able to see them, but if they'd wave. Joan Benoit Samuelson, who was our Warner last year. State historian Earl Shuttleworth, another legend. Harold Pacius and Severin Beliveau. Now, Severin was holding court out there, so I'm not sure that he joined us, but Harold and Severin, I believe, are here. And then we have a very special history maker. They all are, but a very special one who's a history maker before she was a history maker, and that's Governor Mills. So thank you so much for joining us. Takes a village. Well, we have a rich and really wonderful Maine story to share with you tonight. From the moment the Nelson forebears arrived in Maine in the early 1900s, the family has really personified what it means to be Mainers. Pragmatic, hardworking, engaged, joyful, caring, curious, humble, deeply committed, and always, always willing to lean in. The family has played a key role in modernizing Maine and in laying the foundation for the vibrant city that Portland has become today. Now, most of you know some combination of family members, Lenny and Merle, Bruce and Patty, Kenny and Mary, and Andrew. You have a sense of what they have accomplished in their own right and what they have contributed to Maine. Tonight, we're going to put those accomplishments in the context of Harold and Millie Nelson, their parents. Now, if you didn't know Harold and Millie when they were alive, I think you're going to fall in love with them tonight. They were a charming couple. They were a charming couple and beloved civic leaders in Maine from the 1930s till around 2000. They were active in just about every aspect of civic life and driven by a really deep sense of responsibility to the Maine community. Their family has assumed that mantle and built on Harold and Millie's legacy in profound, far-ranging ways. That's the story we're going to share with you tonight. Now, before we dive in, I'd like to express our deep thanks to all of you for supporting tonight's program. Thanks to your generosity, we have raised more than $200,000 to support MHS's work across Maine. That's more than we've ever raised for this event before. We can't really express our appreciation enough to all of you and to the Nelson family for its collaboration and generosity. Thank you so much. We are in the process of investing in building a world-class organization at MHS dedicated to exploring, celebrating, and strengthening Maine. These funds provide really critical support, so thank you again. We'd like to extend a very special thanks to our lead sponsors, Bernstein Shore, and Cap Trust as well, so thanks to them. 21 businesses and organizations are sponsoring this event, and a whopping 147 households have joined the host committee. So thank you to all of you. What a testament that is to the Nelson family. I'd also want to take a moment to thank the incredible team that has put this evening together. First and foremost, I want to thank Christina Traster and Sophie Bray on our team. I think, as the family can attest, a lot of details came into this, and I just can't thank them enough. I also want to thank the entire MHS staff. We have built a really incredible team there, and this event really reflects everything we do as an organization, so thank you to them. I want to thank our partners at Maine Studios who helped us produce, collaborated with us to produce what I think is a really wonderful documentary that we're about to look into. So thank you to Rory Strunk and Ken Hess. This is the time of year where Ken and I spend days and days and hours locked in our editing room together, and we know each other very well. And finally, I want to recognize and thank the Maine Historical Society Board of Trustees for its leadership, and its incredible leadership and support. If our trustees could just wave their hand, there's many, many here. So with that, let's dive in and introduce you to Harold and Millie Nelson.
From the moment their forebears arrived in Maine more than 100 years ago, the Nelson family has personified what it means to be Mainers. Down to earth, hardworking, engaged, committed, leaders of their communities. Harold and Millie Nelson built a business that became a Maine institution and important contributor to the economy. They were beloved community leaders who led campaigns, initiatives, and organizations that touched the lives of countless Mainers across every walk of life. They raised and nurtured a family with a deep sense of commitment who built on Harold and Millie's legacy in amazing ways. The Nelson family has played a central role in modernizing, transforming, and making Maine a better version of itself.
If you look at what they're engaged in, it's every institution, every entity, every activity that's important to the people of Portland, Greater Portland. The list is stunning. They're generous with their time, their ideas, their resources, but they are very low-key about it. They don't need to have the headline. So they're everywhere, they're working hard, and if you go through the leadership of the art museum, the symphony, the hospital, the university, Mecca, Seeds of Peace, on and on and on, and every time you see it, one of the members of the Nelson family stepping forward, taking a quiet leadership role, and that humility at the same time with that commitment was a very impressive combination. I learned a great deal from them.
Nearly 2 million Jews were driven out of the Russian Empire by pogroms between 1880 and 1910. With their homes, lives, and livelihoods at risk, the forebears of the Nelson family made their way out of Belarus and emigrated to America. Oscar and Bessie Rolnick arrived in Bangor in 1904 and established themselves quickly. Mildred Ann Rolnick, their daughter, was born in Bangor in 1915, one of 7 children. Meanwhile, Arthur Katz Nelson and Frida Smofsky emigrated to Yarmouth, Nova Scotia with their families in the 1890s. The Katz part of their name was dropped when the family reached America. Harold Nelson, their son, was born in Yarmouth in 1915, one of 3 children. In 1923, the family moved to Rumford. Maine's paper industry was hitting its stride. Arthur started a furniture business which did well, but then the Depression hit. It would shape the family's experience and outlook profoundly. Harold Nelson graduated from Stevens High School in Rumford in 1931 and enrolled at the University of Maine. Millie Rolnick was a junior at Bangor High School. She played basketball, was a business major, and a member of the National Honor Society. They met when Millie's brother, also a student at the university, invited Harold home for Yom Kippur. Harold and Millie quickly became a couple. As the Depression set in, neither Harold or Millie could afford college. Harold withdrew from the university. But they were a team from the word go. Determined to be together, they eloped in 1934.
Why were you keeping it secret? Why didn't you just tell them?
Our parents felt that I was 19 years old. My mother, I thought she was going to have a fit. 19 years old and not making a living. And she was absolutely right. And certainly no prospects. We were married June 10th by the Justice of Peace.
To tell my mother I was going to stay with my aunt. My aunt, I had to tell, who lived in Saco, that I'm going to Boston to stay with cousins, etc.
Very exciting.
I became a cousin.
Fantastic. I went back to Bangor. He went back to Rumford. We carried on a heavy correspondence and very expensive telephone calls.
I paid the clerk in Portsmouth at the City Hall a $5 bill. You know what a $5 bill was?
Yeah, to keep it out of the newspaper.
Keep it out of the newspaper. He gave him his word, and he put it in the newspaper.
Evidently, it was in the Portsmouth newspaper, and a friend of the family called my sister's husband.
So yeah, they knew.
Right away, somebody knew.
They
Congratulated him on his sister-in-law's being married. He says, my sister-in-law isn't married. He said, oh, yes, she is. I saw it in the Portsmouth paper. Father says to me, that Harold's a very fine young man. I think the two of you ought to get married. So I said, all right, we'll set a date, maybe in a year or two. He says, a year or two? I mean now. So we decided on August 26th.
My mother had a stroke.
His mother and father were deeply concerned about managing and how are you going to make a living and everything. My father just convinced them that they have the smartest son in the world and that he would be able to make a living and things would be just fine. And so we did set the date, and we did have a Yiddish wedding with the rabbi, and everything is legal.
Leonard, their first child, was born in Rumford in 1935. Harold and Millie were ready to make a move.
And she said, there's a job being advertised in the Furniture Journal, and this is what it says, Harold. Highly experienced road salesman, wanted as a stringer to cover Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Western Mass, selling B.F. Huntley case goods. Call Sam Warren for interview. And my dad says, Millie, what do you mean this is ideal for me? I've never had a job. I've never been on the road. I don't have a car. And why would Mr. Warren want to give me any time of day? And Mom said to him, Harold, when he meets you, he'll forget what his ad says. And Dad says as they walked from the train in Quincy through the neighborhood to find his house, he said it was like a movie going from black and white to color. All of a sudden, the streets they're walking on were beautifully manicured lawns. All the shutters were painted. All the windows were trimmed. And he had come from a one-mill town that had been going through a disaster, and now he was in an area that the people were surviving. And he said to Mom, I really have to get this job. This must be a good line because look how Mr. Warren lives. So Mother went behind a tree, Dad went in. A half hour goes by, 45 minutes goes by, an hour goes by, an hour and a half goes by, 2 hours goes by, and the door opens, and there's Dad with 2 satchels. And she screams across the lawn that she was supposed to be hiding, you got the job. And this elderly man looks up over the shoulder and he says, he got the job. And that was Mr. Sam Warren, and that was Dad's first day in the Harold P. Nelson Furniture Agency of Rumford, Maine. And everything flowed from that.
The couple settled in Portland and started their new life. Maine was still very much a Yankee place during the first half of the 20th century. Textile and paper mills needing labor attracted waves of new Mainers, Franco-Americans from Canada and immigrants from Eastern and Southern Europe. The immigrants brought energy, enthusiasm, and labor critical to Maine's economy. but they met harsh discrimination. In the 1920s, the Ku Klux Klan became a potent political force in Maine, fueled by anti-Catholic sentiment and anti-Semitism. An estimated 40,000 Mainers belonged to the Klan. The Klan's influence waned by the mid-1920s, but discrimination remained pervasive.
Millie's mother died, so we went to Bangor to the funeral. We sat there for the mourning period for a few days. And these people this woman was in the house because she couldn't do enough for us. And we came back. We thought it was surprising she didn't come down and greet us, you know. And when I opened the front door, I found a note on my front door. You will please vacate this house at once. And I rang the bell. She came down. I says, what is this all about? Did you put this note? She says, I certainly did. She says, how dare you move in my house and not tell me you're a Jew? I says, you gotta be kidding. She says, I'm not kidding. She said, what do my neighbors think? She said, you get out of here. Well, I told her at that moment, I said, now knowing what type of person you are, we wouldn't stay in your house for 6 minutes beyond the moment that we have to.
And we moved up to Munjoy Hill. That's where I went to the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade at the Shayla School. And that's where I experienced for the first time very angry, raw anti-Semitism. I was beaten up in the schoolyard and called a Christ killer. Now in the 3rd grade, I wasn't sure who Christ was, let alone that I had killed him. So it was very difficult at the time, very much aware of that I was another. I didn't know if anybody else was Jewish except my father, mother, and my brother. So it was a very lonely experience and very frightening.
Nonetheless, Harold and Millie's business was taking off, and they quickly became community leaders. They each played key roles in the business. Harold traveled throughout northern New England. Millie ran the showroom and was the company's secretary. In 1940, Harold's cousin, Irving Small, joined the business. Nelson and Small was born.
Harold and my dad were extremely close. Coming out of the Depression, I believe they felt that the bottom could fall out at any time. Furniture was how they got started. They sought to expand so that if they had 6 out of 8 cylinders going, then they'd be okay. After World War II, there was a great demand for products of all sorts, so they migrated from furniture into household appliances, white goods as they were called, later small electronics, and they soon after expanded into plumbing and heating products as well. The first generation laid down a real corporate identity or culture. Our most valuable assets were good people. We also felt that there was no substitute for high quality. So we always sought out products that worked well and lasted a long time. It was our mission to help our customers grow their business and earn a better livelihood.
Harold and Millie's family grew. Bruce was born in 1937, Kenny in 1943, and Andrew in 1953. They moved to Falmouth in 1946, the first Jewish family there. In the mid-1930s, a new generation of young, professional Jewish leaders was emerging in Portland, part of a broad recalibration of Jewish life in America. Until that point, Jewish life revolved around Orthodox synagogues and practice. Many in this new generation felt that Orthodoxy was too rigid and out of touch with the modernizing world. But they deeply valued their Jewish heritage, culture, and faith. At the same time, they were excluded from Portland's mainstream institutions. The community needed places where Jewish families could come together. Harold and Millie became key members and close friends with a group of civic leaders who transformed Portland's Jewish community. Key figures like the Bernsteins, Shores, and Potters. In the 1930s and 40s, they helped create the Jewish Community Center, Center Day Camp, and Temple Beth El. They were dear friends with Norman Godfrey, the first director of the JCC and vision behind Center Day Camp. They led campaigns for the Jewish Federation and to support the creation of Israel. Harold and Millie were no less engaged in the broader Portland community. Millie was passionately interested in the arts and education throughout her life. With Peggy Osher and Nancy Davidson, she was the co-chair of the annual Temple Beth El Art Show. She was a trustee of the Portland Society of Art in the early 1970s. Harold served as chair of the United Fund and on the boards of Mercy Hospital, Casco Bank, and the Children's Theatre of Maine, among many others. He was an active member of Portland Rotary, the Portland Yacht Club, and the Portland Country Club, which he is credited with integrating.
It's like, you know, that my grandfather was the first Jewish member of the Portland Country Club. That is really cool. That's like brave. That's like, you got to be tolerant. You know, people are going to say things. You can't have any reaction to so many things. You have to be above it. You have to be strong. You have to be Atticus Finch-like in a number of situations. And he's a great golfer as well. So a great equalizer. Okay, the reason he's there is for this, and he's good at it.
Harold and Millie had established themselves as one of Portland's most prominent, influential, and beloved couples. Their warmth, success, undeniable charm, deeply held values, and commitment to their community were helping change Maine.
My mother and father could run anything, okay? I mean, it should be very clear to you. They could run anything. They were clearly very collaborative in their life together. All important decisions, they usually made them together. I remember one time I came home, I was probably 10 years old, and I noticed the refrigerator was gone. And I said, Mother, where's the refrigerator? And she said, well, it was 6 months old, and Dad sold it. And I'm getting a brand new refrigerator in a few minutes. But there was a client who wanted that particular model, so Dad sold it. And I mean, that really happened, okay? I'm not making that up.
Everything Millie did was beautiful, easily done. I mean, she just was so talented. She could do anything. She could sew, she could knit, she could cook, she could clean. She loved music and art. She went to art school. She read, I can remember going there, Lenny sometimes when we would go on a date, we'd come back and Millie would be reading in this beautiful den. It was so quiet, so peaceful, so serene, and so loving. I mean, this was a woman who really made you feel that she was interested in you and cared. Now, we were not an item, mind you, but she was just wonderful. I mean, there was something about the two of them when they were together. It was really quite wonderful. And I knew as our relationship, Lenny and I, grew, that he would be a good husband. Because he lived in an environment where they were loving, caring parents for each other as well as their sons. And I always thought that I would have 4 sons, just like Millie had. She was my role model. She taught me by doing, not telling me. She was a woman that was always there when you needed her and never there when you didn't.
I've been in awe often of Millie and Harold and what they accomplished in this community. They were such gentle but determined barrier breakers. They weren't out there saying, this is wrong. But by the force of their personalities, people would say, you know, this doesn't feel good anymore. We've got to break down some of these barriers. And I don't think the world's going to fall apart when we do so.
It used to be that they published with every campaign the name and the amount of every donor. That would be a list that would come out. Most people were proud to have their name listed, and they were proud to what they gave, and there wasn't a lot of pushback. And I was looking over the list. I must have been 12 or 13 years old, and it arrived in the mail, and I was looking over the list. And I saw this adult woman that I knew by name, and the gift was $10. And I said to Dad when he got home, I pointed out this, and I said, what's your impression of a gift of that size? And he said to me, and I'll probably be brought to tears, he said to me, if we measure gifts by their sacrifice, this is the best gift on the page. I never forgot that. The thing you learned, at least at our dinner table, was ask people for the best they got. And if they give you the best they got, be grateful.
It's a pretty special couple. I'm now really pleased to welcome Shira Ben David and Adam Ben David to the stage to kick off our musical performances. Both are remarkable musicians in their own right, and they also have a very special connection to the family. Shira is cantor at Temple Shalom, one of Chicago's oldest and largest synagogues. Her brother Adam has had a variety of roles on Broadway and currently serves as the associate musical director for the Book of Mormon. So thank you.
I'm not doing anything from the Book of Mormon, so don't get excited. Actually, tonight is for my brother and myself to make music for you, the most deeply and personal evening of music that I'll ever be able to sing. And so my dear grandfather, Norman Godfrey, of blessed memory that you saw up there, this friendship and love and chosen family that we are with the Nelsons has been going on now, including with my children, for 4 generations. And it started with Harold and Millie living across the street on Dartmouth Street. Did I say that right? Dartmouth. And I could hear Harold and Millie saying these words themselves. I could hear each one of you. No complaints and no regrets. I still believe in chasing dreams and placing bets. But I have learned that all you give is all you get. So give it all you've got. I've had my share, I've drank my fill, and even though I'm satisfied, I'm hungry still to see what's down another road beyond the hill and do it all again. So here's to life and every joy it brings. Here's to life, to dreamers and their dreams. It's funny how the time just flies, how love can go from warm hellos to sad goodbyes and leave you with the memories you've memorized to keep your winters warm. For there's no yes in yesterday, and who knows what tomorrow brings or takes away. As long as I'm still in the game, I want to play for laughs, for life, for love. So here's to life and every joy it brings. Here's to life, to dreamers and their dreams. May all your storms be well. Here's to love. Here's to you. Here's to life. Here's to love. Here's to you.
Thank you so much. That was really beautiful. So now we're going to turn back to the Nelson family story and the next generation, so there'll be many more familiar faces. So here we go, chapter 2.
Lenny, Bruce, Kenny, and Andrew had the ability to go anywhere in the world, but they all came back to Maine. And they added something essential to the Nelson story, partners with every bit of Millie's charm, talent, and chutzpah. The 1960s through the 1990s was a critical moment in Maine history, a period of modernization and transformation that laid the foundation for Maine's current economic and cultural vibrancy. The Nelsons are part of an important yet largely unsung generation, young couples who purposefully came back or moved to Maine to build their lives and raise their families.
And it was a pretty exciting place to be, because you could be a factor in the change of a community and a larger community of Maine.
Merle Royde grew up on Munjoy Hill and met Lenny when they were both 13. Lenny and Merle became an item at Deering High School, and like Harold and Millie, were a team from the word go. Merle was a class officer, cheerleader, and elected Miss Deering. Lenny was a distinguished student, star of the varsity tennis team, and elected president of the Center Youth at the Jewish Community Center. Together they went off to Boston for college, Merle at Lesley and Lenny at Harvard, and for graduate school. They married in 1956 at the end of their junior year. Lenny and Merle's first child, Judd, and Harold and Millie's first grandchild, was born in 1959. The young family moved back to Maine in 1960. Eve was born in 1962 and Julie in 1965. Immediately, they got involved. Lenny and Merle had the same easy grace and determined drive as Harold and Millie, equally focused on family, business, and community. Lenny joined Bernstein & Bernstein in 1960. By 1964, he had organized the firm's merger. Bernstein, Shore, Sawyer, and Nelson was born. Under Lenny's leadership, the firm grew rapidly and was essential to Portland's development. He helped Bath Iron Works negotiate to build a dry dock at the Maine State Pier in Portland in 1981, key to the revitalization of Portland's waterfront. With Harold, Lenny helped lead the effort to build the Cumberland County Civic Center. His business and legal skills were recognized far beyond Maine. Lenny became a fiduciary to prominent families across the country.
I wish I had the secret sauce for how the heck he does it. Number one, he's always listening, but he's a listener when it comes to opportunity, professional opportunity, or things just plain of interest. That's another great thing about this family. They are so curious. They don't want to miss out on anything that's interesting and exciting.
Lenny became one of the great champions of the arts in Maine. He joined the board of the Portland Symphony Orchestra in 1963 and became its president when he was still in his 20s. He chaired the new Maine State Commission on the Arts and Humanities, an agency created to support culture in Maine. Lenny joined the board of the Portland Museum of Art in 1975 and over decades helped transform the museum. He led the Architect Selection Committee for the Payson Building, designed by Henry Cobb and I.M. Pei.
I don't know, I must have been maybe 10 or 11. We went to the bank because we were going to get some like barbecue stuff. You know, in the old days, you had to go into the bank. So we wait in line to go into the bank, and we'll wait for the teller. We're going to get $100, and she gives it to us, and we go out to the car, and my dad has me count it, and I realize she's given us $120 and not $100. And I'm happy. We got an extra $20. We got free $20. I'm very, very, very happy. My dad says we have to go back in and return it. And I go, why? We didn't steal it. It was an accident, but in our favor. And he says to me that we have to go back and return it because at the end of the day, when they cash out, she's going to be $20 short of what she owes. So she's going to have to pay it out of her money. So in fact, we're stealing it from her. So we got to go back in and return it. And I was like, I could not believe that we had to return it. So we go back inside and we get back in the line again. The old man has us wait in the line again. I'm like, come on. We wait in line. We get up there and my dad gives me the 20 and he kind of urges me forward and he goes, you return it to her. And I'm like frozen. So I kind of walk up to that, to where the teller is and I hand her this. She goes, what's wrong? Weren't you just in here? And I go, you gave us $20 extra. And she started to cry and thank me. And I was like, so then I leave. I'm walking out of the bank with my dad, and he could have said any number of things to me. And he said nothing. We just walked to the car, got in the car and drove on and got the stuff, meaning the lesson was clear. He didn't have to hammer it into my head. He made me do the legwork in the hopes that it would make my brain work, which it did. They raised me, and what I could see from how they raised my sisters, as if they liked us. Not just as if they had a responsibility to see that we knew right from wrong, but that they liked us at the same time. Which you don't realize how rare that is till you grow up and you have friends whose parents weren't like that.
Meanwhile, Merle too emerged as a pioneer and a powerhouse. There were few women and fewer Jews in the Maine legislature when Merle was elected to serve in 1976. Her work and advocacy touched countless lives and helped change the way Augusta thinks and works.
Maine was in transition, as I mentioned a minute ago, with more women entering the workforce in the whole continuum of jobs. And I think Maine was open to more women in the legal fields, the medical fields. The nonprofit world was benefiting from the energy and the economic need for women to be in the workforce. The one income family wasn't working anymore. So women wanted and needed. I mean, I remember that even from when I graduated from college, how things had changed. So it was wonderful to have more women advocating for more women up in the legislature in Augusta.
She had a vision of what Maine could be, and it could be better than what it was, and that we couldn't turn our backs to domestic violence. We couldn't turn our backs to the fact that that women's rights were not being fully recognized, that gay rights were not being fully recognized, that we had an enthusiasm for guns that went over just recreational use to a point where they could be dangerous and linked back to domestic violence. I mean, these are the kind of things that at that time in the late 1970s, those were not necessarily at the tip of everybody's tongue.
By the time Merle retired from the legislature in 1986, she and Lenny were still young, but they were well-established, seasoned leaders with a remarkable capacity and commitment to contribute. Harold had hoped to be a doctor before he was forced to drop out of the University of Maine. Bruce inherited that gene. After graduating from Bowdoin in 1959, he attended Columbia Medical School. He and his first wife, Phyllis, were married in 1960. Lisa was born in 1963, Dan followed in 1965, and Jennifer in 1968. Bruce served as a surgeon with the U.S. Public Health Service at Fort Defiance, Arizona in the mid-60s, but like Lenny, Bruce was drawn to Maine. With his young family, he moved back in 1971. He opened his own practice.
He was the kind of doctor, he is the kind of doctor that is rare these days. He cared about his patients. And that was the hallmark of being Bruce's patient.
In 1984, Bruce and his second wife, Patty, were married and soon joined by their children, Sarah and Mike. He pursued his far-reaching interest in Maine history as a collector, preservationist, and champion of the cultural community.
He developed this extraordinary passion for collecting postcards, not just Maine, but way beyond Maine, although his Maine material was very important and very strong, and he had a wonderful eye for it.
Dad was always fascinated by history, and I was his kid, so if you want to spend time with your dad, You'd go spend 2 hours at the hospital waiting for him to do his rounds on a Saturday morning, and then we would bushwhack through the state, go into antique stores. Ultimately, we'd show up at people's houses that he had apparently connected with, and we'd flip through their collections of books and trade cards, postcards, magazines, and that's what we would do every weekend.
Bruce was also passionate about the arts.
There was a building on Congress Street that was in not disrepair, but it was just vacant, and there was no use for it at a time when Congress Street was really struggling. And he had the idea of taking this space and creating artist studios. And so he converted the entire building. It was his vision to create a space for artists. And he charged $100, $125 a month, $150 a month for these spaces. And it ended up being, a really important community amongst Portland's artists. And this was in the 80s and 90s. Dad is not someone who ever, other than landmarks, to my recollection, was interested in being on boards and interested in public-facing positions or whatever. He liked to do what he liked to do, and he loved art in his way. He liked to be in the trenches.
Bruce also had a protege, his younger brother, Andrew.
So when Bruce would come home, say, from college or medical school, he would very often take me in his car on some of his adventures to go and look at things in shops and at country fairs and auctions. And he'd give me a few dollars and tell me to buy whatever I wanted. And Bruce really got me interested in a lot of those things. And my world of interest became, different things than what he was interested in.
At Harvard, he took a course in connoisseurship.
This was absolutely an essential for people who were preparing to become museum directors or who were going to be interested in the arts. And it taught you what it meant to be a connoisseur, how you could distinguish one item from another. And it wasn't about the price of the item, but about the intrinsic worth of the item. And he said that was absolutely one of those essential courses.
Immediately after graduation, he began to build a global business, Nelson Rarities, finding, saving, and identifying patrons for beautiful pieces.
I began to collect other things. I got into antique automobiles and then into antique watches because they were mechanical. That led me to jewelry and gems and geology and all that sort of thing.
Kenny met Mary Pinnell at Smith College in 1965. Mary grew up in Seattle, where her father was an engineer at Boeing. After Kenny graduated from Bowdoin in 1966, he and Mary settled in Boston and were married in 1967. Like Harold and Millie, Kenny and Mary were a team from the word go. After law school, Kenny was hired at Boston law firm Mintz Levin in 1970. He soon made partner. Caleb was born in 1970, Joshua followed in 1973, and Matthew in 1978. And then, in 1980, Kenny got the call from Harold that now seems inevitable.
So one day he says to me on the phone, you got a good eye for business. How come you never joined me in the business? I says, because you never asked me. And there was this long silence. And he says, I think I just did.
Kenny and David Small ran the business, but Harold remained a critical voice. He also made sure they didn't miss the generational opportunity to become an Armstrong distributor.
The phone rings. It's my father from Florida. He says, tell me, what's going on? Well, business is a little bit slow. We're working to control our inventories. Well, what else is new? Oh, the Armstrong guy was in today. And he says, so what did you tell him? Don told him it wasn't the right time for us. Dad says, how often do they change distributors? I says, well, I asked that question. Last time was 35 years ago. He says, do you think you're going to be ready when you're 80? And I said, are you telling me that was a mistake? And he said, well, I just said what I said. So I get Don back in the office. I said, Don, we're going to have to change our strategy. Get this guy on the phone and tell him to come back to Maine, which he did. We made the deal the next morning. We signed the documents and we became Armstrong, a very successful Armstrong Distributors. And people would say, boy, you were so smart to take that line on. And I tell them, and they would say, that's the advantage of having youth in a business. And I'd say to them, I got to tell you the whole story. The youth in the business killed the opportunity. The old derelict man was the one who said, wake up. 35 years is a long time to wait for an opportunity.
The annual international trips that the company organized to thank its customers were a cornerstone of Nelson and Small culture.
In 1976, as Joe said, he started developing a low-income housing project here in Maine. And because he was building, I don't remember how many units, maybe 50 units, he bought a lot of appliances from Nelson and Small. So every year, Nelson and Small, Millie and Harold, took a group of the people that they were selling to on a trip somewhere, and this was a trip to England. So we got invited to go to London, and so we went on the trip. Merle and Lenny were there, Bruce and his wife were there, Kenny and Mary, Millie and Harold, and they were like the royalty. And they would get on the bus every morning and they would come through and they'd say hi to everyone and welcome us and make us feel wonderful.
Mary, too, emerged as a community leader. She served on the town council in Falmouth and as president of the Maine Municipal Association. In 2008, Mary was elected to the Maine legislature.
Those are the kind of things specifically that she pushed in education that is really about equity, really about helping people have access to higher education. Mary Nelson spent so much time in the education committee, and it's a tough committee in the sense that there's a lot of struggle over things like the school funding formula, teacher preparation, teacher certification, mental health issues that kids are struggling with, special ed issues, arts and cultural issues as well. And Mary was always an advocate with students first. Her perspective was, let's start out with the kids who absolutely have less of a chance, and what kind of resources, what kind of support do they need, what kind of teachers do they need to be successful.
She served as board president of the Portland Symphony, supported the Portland Conservatory of Music, and has sung with choral art for 30 years. Like Harold and Millie, the Nelson family's next generation has had an outsized impact on Maine.
It's now time for more music. It's now my pleasure to welcome Jared Bigu, a classical voice student at the Osher School of Music here at USM. Now, many of you may or may not that the Nelson family has been, Mary in particular and Kenny, huge supporters of the School of Music here and musical interests in general. So it's really meaningful, I think, to have a USM product here singing and entertaining us. Jared, this summer, will be performing as Bastian in Mozart's Bastian and Bastian with Modern Vintage Opera in Connecticut, and as a soloist at the White Mountain Musical Arts Bach Festival. So if you want to see him again after tonight, Jared, please join us.
That was wonderful. Very, very good. Good evening. I'm Peter Merle. It's my great pleasure to serve as chairman of the Board of Trustees for the Maine Historical Society. I'm delighted to be with you tonight to celebrate the Nelson family, all of their accomplishments and their role for the state of Maine. It's just wonderful. We have a wonderful video from Angus King to help mark the occasion. Like most of you, like all of you, I've known Angus for a really long time. He has a long and positive record of public service to the people of Maine, dating back to that public TV show he used to have that showed us how state government actually worked. One of the appealing things to me, appealing traits about Angus, is his appreciation of history. Whether he's highlighting the role of Joshua Chamberlain in the siege of the Maine State House in 1880, or reminding us of the importance of Margaret Chase Smith's Declaration of Conscience 75 years ago and its relevance today, he reminds us, yes. He reminds us that we must learn from history. Now, I expected that I would make this presentation and Mary would be somewhere out here and I would have to meet her muster. But this is a really special occasion and Angus is actually here. Angus? Stand up, please, Angus. Where are you? There he is. I told Angus that he tossed me a curveball by showing up and that I would have to tone it down because he's here. He said, oh no, don't go into any trouble. Ladies and gentlemen, Angus King, as they say, live on tape from his red office.
Robert F. Kennedy started one of his most important speeches in South Africa with these words: "It is through numberless diverse acts of courage and belief that human history is shaped." And that's what we're talking about tonight. Numberless diverse acts of courage and belief. That summarizes the Nelson family and the actions that they've taken on behalf of their country, their state, their community. I can think of no family that's had a larger impact on Maine than the Nelsons. I've worked with Lenny for years, known Kenny, known Mary, Merle, the rest of the family, and what they've brought to this state from their parents who came here in the 30s, and what they've contributed to the state is nothing short of remarkable. So it's an honor for me to be here to honor my old friends, to honor people who have done so much for this state and so much for our community, and they're still doing it. So for the Maine Historical Society to bring us together tonight to honor this remarkable family and what they've done for their community and for Maine is an honor for me to be able to participate. And I just want to say thanks to my friends in the Nelson family, but also to the Maine Historical Society for making this evening possible. This is what history is all about. As Kennedy said, it's from those acts of courage and belief that history is made, and the Nelsons have made that history here in Maine.
We are so tremendously fortunate here in Maine to have such excellent political leadership, so thank you both, to you both again. So now we're going to bring our Nelson story to the present and wrap it up. This is the last chapter of our documentary, and followed by that, we're going to be presenting the award to the family. So here we go.
You see, everybody tells me that their religion is the best. And the truth of the matter is that if every man practiced his religion, he would be a good man.
I don't have the answers. I'm saying the answers are here. And it's man's job and man's duty to ferret out these answers rather than sit there and pray all day long that this is going to come out all right. Just pray to God. I think God has a greater message to us. Go out and get off your duff and go out and find the answers and find how this man can live with this man, or this person can live with this person, or how this disease can be eradicated from the earth, or nature can be taken care of. I think there's answers for everything. So I said that to Rabbi Scott. I said, I'm not religious, I believe this. He said, Harold, you're a very religious man. I said, well, I don't consider that religiousness in your terms. I consider it, I can't explain, I just consider it a moral way of life, or not even a moral way. I consider it a mission that man has on the face of the earth. And it's his job to find the answers. And if people just sit and do nothing, don't help somebody, don't do something, and they have missed a mission of life.
Harold and Millie Nelson instilled a powerful sense of responsibility, stewardship, and commitment in their family. They lived to be part of, support, and take pride in the careers and causes important to their children and grandchildren. Together, the Nelson family, generation after generation, has given everything they have had and helped transform virtually every organization, cause, and community they have been part of. When the sons and their families came back to Maine, they saw Portland's potential to become a world-class city. Like their parents, they understood that every dimension of civic life is interconnected and essential to the health and vitality of a society. The economy, education, and the culture that gives our lives joy and meaning. They have helped build numerous organizations that have touched countless lives. Lives touched by policy, by jobs that have been created, by educational opportunities, by performances in museums, and by the historical fabric and forward-looking investments that drive the vitality of our city and state. They have done this by seeing the good in people and taking the long view. The Portland Symphony Orchestra and University of Southern Maine are just two examples.
When you stay and invest decade over decade, and you do it with integrity like they do, and like I mentioned, like when you ask and when you question, and when you look deeply, you become a champion.
The Nelsons saw that before almost anybody that I know. They understood that USM plays a vital role in the economic potential of this region, and they lived it. They found ways to help out the university, whether it's in the arts program or whether it's in the engineering program, and they understood immediately why it mattered.
And I think that family, those kids, were raised with a sense of duty and a sense of commitment to community, and that you have the responsibility to be part of your community, to contribute to it in leadership ways. And so that it's a family culture. It's easy to say exciting things about what you're going to do, but eventually it devolves into hard work. And I think one of the distinguishing characteristics of the Nelson family, besides being visionaries, is that they're willing to do the hard work, to chair the committees, to be the head of the Falmouth Town Council, to be on the committee in charge of the art museum, of the symphony, to be on the fundraising committees, to do the work of building the community. And that's one of their distinguishing characteristics. And the quiet and consistent and persistent way in which they did it was inspirational.
The Nelson family's story reflects both the best of Maine and reminds us how recently prejudice and discrimination were prevalent throughout the state, of the need for vigilance and to never back away from our values. Through the family's efforts, generous spirits, and commitment to looking out for and improving the lives of others, they have helped Maine become a more vibrant, diverse, accepting, loving place, a better version of itself.
I realize I have become one of those people who stays for the credits. My name is Michael Bork, and I am a pleasure to be the Vice Chair of the Board of the Maine Historical Society and President and CEO of MEMIC here in Portland. I'm joined here by our old friend Steve Bromage and by MHS Treasurer Natalie Solotoff, who is a managing partner of wealth management at RM Davis. It is our great pleasure and very humbling experience following this amazing night to be able to present tonight's awards for the 2025 Maine History Maker to the Nelson family on behalf of the Board of Trustees. To our distinguished Nelson family trustee honorees, since your ancestors arrived in Maine more than 100 years ago, your family has clearly demonstrated a unique and deep commitment to the Maine community. With every organization, project, goal, or challenge you take on, you show great vision, compassion, and intellect. You show up. You do the hard work. You care about family, friends, and neighbors. And in every endeavor, you have a keen sense of what's possible and what it will take to get there. Tonight's event is also a celebration of the many Mainers who came before us and on whose shoulders we stand. As part of the award, we'd like to remember and honor Harold and Millie Nelson for their grace, wisdom, and never-ending optimism. We sure wish they were here tonight, but I have to tell you, it was a great pleasure to hear them on the video. I'm certain they would be quite pleased and proud of tonight's evening and seeing the hundreds of family and friends gathered here with us. All of you are people who care, as they did, deeply about Maine, past, present, and future. So thank you, Nelson family, for, as Harold would say, and as Kenny told us, giving it the best you've got.
And it is now my honor to present 4 awards to Harold and Millie's sons and their families. The awards are hand-carved wooden clocks in the shape of Maine, and we hope that you'll find the perfect space to display them prominently in your homes so that you will be reminded of Maine Historical Society's and our whole community's gratitude. We'll ask each person or couple to pose briefly once they come up for a photo and then be seated in the chairs. So first, Andrew Nelson, please come to the podium. Congratulations. Next, my pleasure to welcome Kenny and Mary Nelson forward. Next, Dan Nelson and Sarah Nelson, please come to the podium to accept the award on behalf of Bruce Nelson. And finally, Lenny and Merle.
Well, now you're in for a very long speech, which I'm going to abbreviate because none of us saw the video before tonight. In any event, on behalf of the entire Nelson family, I sincerely thank the Maine Historical Society, and especially Steve Bromage, the Executive Director, Christina Traister, the Director of Advancement, and Sophie Bray, the Donor Engagement Specialist, for this unexpected award. Unexpected in the sense that we had no idea this was coming until 5 months ago. I also thank the entire Maine historical team, including the board and the entire staff, who have all made this evening's event so meaningful to our family. I also would like to thank everyone who is here, all our friends and family members. I would like to thank especially the 17 people who participated in the videos, and to Senator King for being the 18th person. I was going to talk about my mother and father because it began with them 90 years ago, but I'll skip a lot of that because you heard it in the video. Not surprisingly, they quickly fell in love. Dad was smart, courageous, ambitious, handsome, and incredibly decent. Mom was his absolute equal partner in everything, in business, in life, and in parenting. She was a wise woman, a thoroughly modern Millie. One of my mother's contemporaries, a gentleman, once said to me, "You know, your mother was a knockout." If he had said that to me when I was 17, I would have been embarrassed. Later on, I understood. She grew up in the Depression with 6 siblings and with an immigrant father and mother who believed that the future in America would be better than the past. Harold was born in Nova Scotia before immigrating to Lewiston with his parents in 1923 when he was 8 years old. Harold's family faced the same depression as Millie's did, but with fewer resources. I have one clear memory from my childhood about Mom and Dad's values. I was a teenager, and I made a disparaging remark about a low-level employee at Nelson and Small. My father immediately challenged me. He said, "Lenny, that must stop. All human beings, regardless of their station in life, want respect, want to feel worthwhile. You must never forget that." And I never did. Privilege. I want to talk a moment about privilege. Most people think of privilege as wealth, or something close to wealth. But in the Nelson family, from the time I was born forward, privilege was knowing that your parents loved you, were totally reliable, entirely committed to each other, and wanted you to have the best life possible. That kind of privilege gave all 4 Nelson boys an incredible head start in life. Our parents' respect for education was basic to their value system, no doubt driven in part by Dad's forced withdrawal from the University of Maine in 1932 because there was no money. He always regretted his withdrawal. During my college years, I discovered that many of the courses I took at Harvard were repeated at night by the Lowell Institute for anyone. Dad commuted to Cambridge every Tuesday night for 2 semesters at the Institute, studying good and evil in Western literature, a course I took during the days. Can you imagine anyone working full-time and running a 100-person company to do that? Return to Maine. When Merle and I returned in 1960 with our infant son, Judd, after college, law school, graduate school for Merle, and Merle's teaching, my parents remained incredibly active. They were only 45 years old. Nelson and Small was still a growing and expanding business. Dad did what he did best. He ran things, the company, and the record-breaking United Way campaign of 1961. He continued to broaden his reach by soon serving on the governing boards of the Casco Bank and Trust Company and the Mercy Hospital. Mom was still raising one more child, Andrew, who was only 7 years old when we returned. Then Merle and I came back made a lot of sense. I had a good job with a wonderful law firm, although small, loved Maine, and I knew I could build a successful law practice, although my imagination never contemplated a 100-lawyer law firm. Merle was not yet in the legislature, as 2 more children were yet to be born, but her volunteer service with Preble Street and Head Start began on day 1. We were young, we were energetic, and hopeful. Chapter 4, Reimagining Portland. In our early years, as the kids were growing up, we engaged in lots of public activities that were intended to make Portland the kind of place to which young adults would want to return. Portland, you all know, in 2025 is dramatically different and certainly more interesting and sophisticated than the Portland of 1960. Many of you in this room, if not all of you, have played a meaningful role in the transformation of this small and wonderful city. We all wanted to build institutions and enterprises and environments that would make Portland more attractive, whether it was the Symphony or the University of Southern Maine or the Portland Museum of Art or the Baxter Boulevard walking path. We were proud of this little town by the sea. We hope to retain all the old advantages like fresh air, water, and trees, manageable traffic, and endless outdoor beauty. To that extraordinary base, we all hope to add a dynamic, academic, artistic, commercial, and cultural overlay, disproportionate to the size of the city. The restaurant explosion was not part of the plan, but it ended up being part of the new attraction. When you add it all together today, everyone in America knows that Portland is an incredible place in which to live. Chapter 5, More Brothers to Come. Merle and I never imagined that all of my 3 brothers, after completing their educations, would return home. We thought that we would lose them to the opportunities of Boston or Los Angeles or New York. Dr. Bruce was at UCLA Medical Center as a senior surgical resident in an elite urology program serving a great hospital in what was then an American paradise. Kenny quickly became a partner in one of Boston's most distinguished law firms, and he and Mary already held important elected public positions in Massachusetts. Andrew, after finishing college, had the beginning of an international jewelry clientele who he could serve from anywhere in the world. So you ask, how did it happen? Why did everyone come home? Once again, Harold and Millie played a big role. We loved and admired our parents. That pull, however subtle or understated, never went away. Their personal energy continued throughout their marriage, and that energy and lifestyle attracted their children. Harold and Millie's capacity for hospitality and family dinners never stopped. So one by one, or two by two, the brothers returned to Maine. Bruce and his family in 1972, Andrew in 1976, and Kenny, in order to become the future chief executive officer of Nelson & Small, came with his family in 1980. All of my parents' grandchildren, of whom there are 11, all grew up in Greater Portland. So the ties to Maine and Portland are quite real. Commitment to the community, Chapter 6. I cannot help but think of all the institutions and enterprises that benefited from my father's and mother's commitment to Maine and to various forms of public service. Starting with Harold and Millie and covering just the next generation, a Nelson family member presided over or sat on the following public boards in Maine, or almost Maine: Casco Bank and Trust, Depositors Trust, Atlantic Bank, the United Way of Southern Maine, the Mercy Hospital. Not only was my father Jewish, this was a Catholic hospital. The Jewish Community Center, the Portland Museum of Art, the Maine Arts Commission, the Children's Museum and Theater, Seeds of Peace, the Maine Community College System, Lesley University, Smith College, the USM Board of Advisors, the Maine College of Art, the Holocaust Human Rights Center, the Maine Historical Society, the New England Organ Bank, the Gulf of Maine Research Institute, Spurwing School, Temple Bethel, the Jewish Community Alliance, the Junior League, the Choral Arts Society, Landmarks, and the Waynfleet School. If you add in the 4 elections by 2 Nelsons to the Falmouth Town Council and 8 elections by 2 Nelsons to the Maine Legislature, you begin to see the scope and the passion for community that motivated this entire family. And in all honesty, I have left out some other boards that they served on in the interests of time. Conclusion. We are extremely thankful to the Maine Historical Society for encouraging the Nelson family to shine a light on the extraordinary legacy created by Harold and Millie as they lived a lifetime of unselfish commitment to the community they both loved. Tonight's event is a public recognition of Harold and Millie's leadership, their character, and their humanity. They wanted to make Maine a better place for everyone, and they certainly succeeded. Thank you all very much.
That was wonderful. Now you can sit, and Shira and Adam are going to sing for us one more time.
That'd be great.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Thank you, Lenny, and thank you to the whole family for everything you have done for Maine. We are so deeply appreciative to have the honor to pull this all together and share it and really recognize it, because I think these are the values that we all aspire to and really attribute and think is the best of Maine. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We'll have coffee and refreshments in a moment, but we have one more program element, and that is Shira and Adam will join us back on stage.
So I want to tell you that we are just one of the many millions of families that the legacy of the Nelson family have touched and lifted. Just one small family. And I want you to know what that's done for us. In 1947, as the Jewish Community Center was beginning to thrive, my grandfather of blessed memory died very suddenly at the age of 37 from leukemia, and he left 3 very young daughters, one of them being our mother. And she spent her entire life reminding me that how her family, how Ethel and those 3 daughters survived was from the sustenance, the support, the love, and the devotion of the Nelson family. And I want to tell you, now that I've seen that video, the mantra that my mother always said, the story she always told, she said, Shira, if the fridge went out, the next day there'd be a truck in front of the house and there'd be a new fridge. And now I'm wondering if we got that fridge. I'm just saying, it's possible. But without you, our family doesn't survive the way it did. My mother doesn't end up at Juilliard. She doesn't end up at the Met. I don't end up becoming a second-generation cantor. He definitely doesn't end up on Broadway. And we don't end up being at camp in Maine every summer. And I don't end up naming my first son Baxter. So thank you, because you lifted my family. And then over the years, Kenny, I found letters that you wrote about my grandfather. The years that you spent then continuing to lift the legacy of just one of the families that you touched is something that I'll never forget. And so I've been waiting, our family's been waiting since 1947 to sing these words to you. I've got a roof over my head. I've got a warm place to sleep. Some nights I lie awake counting gifts instead of counting sheep. I've got a heart that can hold love. I've got a mind that can think. There may be times when I lose the light and let my spirit sink, but I can't stay depressed when I remember how I'm blessed. Grateful, grateful, truly grateful I am. Grateful, grateful, truly blessed and duly grateful. In a city of strangers, I've got a family of friends. No matter what rocks and brambles fill the way, I know that they will stay until the end. I feel a hand holding my hand. It's not a hand you can see, but on the road Thank you.